so much for being here today. You can take your masks off if you like to, if you're comfortable. And if you prefer to keep them on, that's fine too. Yeah. Everybody can hear me? Yeah. You can always come closer. I don't bite. I know sometimes it's like, I'm very happy to see that there's like 5 of you sitting up front. Last week it was like everybody was on the couches. Like, hello! How's everybody feeling after their yin class? Pretty good?
Awesome.
Yeah. Good. We have lots of concepts that we touched on in class that I'm going to bring up again in this wisdom circle. And toward the end, I'll ask if you have any questions or reflections that you would like to share. At that point in time, I am recording this session because I do post it to our YouTube channel eventually. If you do not wish to be recorded, then please let me know, and I will pause that so that there's privacy for whatever it is that you would like to share. So let's sit tall. We'll close the eyes. I'm just taking a few breaths here. With each exhalation, landing gently in the space that you occupy. With each inhalation, cultivating the intention of presence and a willingness to allow the heart and mind to be open, for seeds to be planted, and for further inquiry as you see fit. And drawing the hands together in front of the heart. Share a mantra with you. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha, Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha, Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. And one Om. And releasing the hands down, fluttering the eyes open. And so the Guru mantra, which is the first one, is invoking the aspect of the Guru. All the great teachers throughout time, all the wisdom that they discovered and that was revealed to them. And acknowledging that in this moment, we have the ability to sit with that wisdom, to be present to it, and to, through our free will, make a choice about how it best aligns with our life and our spiritual inquiry in this life. And the more that we inquire, and the more that we honor, and the more that we are present to what is, the more open we tend to be to this process of being alive. The more open we tend to be toward potential solutions for the problems of suffering, to the moments where we are ignorant, the more open we are to a different way of doing things. So the Guru mantra means so much. It's saying thank you for the wisdom that's been passed down through all of these thousands and thousands of years. It goes to the Guru, which is divinity itself. It says thank you for sharing this with us and not just keeping veils of ignorance over our eyes and heart, but also in giving us the means by which to remove those veils and to come into a closer, more intimate relationship with whatever name it is that we choose. Whether it's Shiva, Shakti, Durga, Christ, Buddha, Muhammad, whatever your avatar, your aspect, your preference of God is, thank God that those veils of ignorance that keep you thinking you are divided and separated can be removed. We've been given that wisdom. And thank goodness also, God, Goddess, that we've also been given the means to alleviate suffering of our own and to support the alleviation of the suffering of others. Through our own internal inquiry, through our own choosing to be better people, to be good people, to be kind people, to be thoughtful, devoted, of service. We've been given the means. Now all we have to do is take them up and put them into play. That's not easy. Not in a world where we're constantly bombarded, where we're constantly coming up to our triggers and being triggered by them. It's not easy in a world where, well, much of the population would prefer we remain ignorant. They just would. And that's because of power and greed and all of these types of things, which we all experience. Every one of us. We're all greedy for power in some way or another, right? But when we step firmly onto our path of spiritual inquiry, what we're asking of ourselves is, in what ways am I attached to power, to greed, to money, to harm, to violence? In what ways? How does it affect me? How does it affect people around me? And what are the means of changing that in myself so that I can relate to something else instead? The something else that we relate to is the opposite of that which causes suffering. It's love, compassion, and unity. It's humbleness. It's creativity. It's appreciation and gratitude. It's inquiry and exploration. It's courage. So if we wish to alleviate or end suffering, then we need to understand the cause of that and invoke its opposite. Does that make sense? Yeah. Why don't we do it then? I mean, it really is kind of straightforward, right? It's like, yeah, totally. Why don't we do it then? Well, because these veils of ignorance that we were talking about in class this morning, and that we'll talk about for a moment now, because they're thick and they're embedded and they are so interwoven with the tissues of our being. They're like the fascia that runs through our physical body. Fascia is like the connective tissues, right? It's like it can't be separated out really from our overall being, physical being. And ignorance is kind of like that, in that it exists in places and in ways that we're not aware of. And so we think that, well, I gave up my ignorance of being angry with that person, so ignorance is gone now. It's like, not really. No, ignorance is not gone because we've taken a single action or made a single decision. It's just that we've made a single decision with regard to it. And now we really have to do the work of finding out how it's going to manifest next. Yeah. So we tend to think in the spiritual world that enlightenment, awakening, self-awareness is a one-stop shop. That's it. It happened, I'm good. It's not the way it is. It's a come and go. It's a testing ground. It's a proving ground. It's a visitation. It's not a permanent state for 99.9999% of people. You know who it might be a permanent state for? Are like the saints that are walking around today, like Dalai Lama and Mother Amma, Thich Nhat Hanh. For these people, and they would say, no, not even for us. Because they too experience anger, they too experience greed, they too experience, judgment that is of a critical, harmful nature. They too experience these things, but their relationship with it is different. They don't let it control them the way that we allow it to control us. So this veil of ignorance is very, very thick, and it permeates all levels of our being and all experiences that we have ever had, have, or ever will have. And so in order for us to thin that veil, we really need to be diligent. And we need to be very clear with ourselves that our work in this life is never done. I know it sounds like a downer, but it's not. It's not a downer, and here's why. Our work in this life is never done, but it becomes more obvious and more joyful and more spacious. It becomes more of an inquiry and less of a curse. It becomes more of a curative and less of a poison. It becomes more of a journey and less of a burden. You see, we oftentimes feel that the spiritual journey is going off to Machu Picchu or over to India. Certainly those are wonderful places to visit, but that's not your spiritual journey, not really. Your spiritual journey is inside yourself. It's not outside. There is nothing outside of you that can bring you to yourself. Nothing. There are things outside of you that can give you the illusion of, I've finally met myself. They're tools only. To meet yourself, you have to go to yourself. And that is not outside of yourself. That is inside. So the first thing that we need to do on this spiritual path is stop going there, like as an escape. And if you want to go there, then just go, but don't go with the expectation that I'm going to experience awakening and my whole life is going to be perfect now and this is just so cool. Because the reality is that your whole life is not going to be perfect now. The plane is still going to have turbulence, the bus is still going to be late, and you're still going to get frustrated, period. You won't be able to speak the language in the villages, and that'll be frustrating. And they won't have the kind of soda that you like, and that will be frustrating. And there won't be a Wawa on every corner, and that will be frustrating. And you'll just have to face every single thing that happens. But you can't do that unless you go inside. You gotta go inside. And then when you go to India or to Machu Picchu or wherever it is you choose to go to, you go because you know you're seeing God's earth. You go because you know that there's beauty there. You go because it's just appreciation and experience. And it's just another encounter. But you also know you don't have to go there. You go because it's a choice. You don't have to go there to know yourself, because you already are coming into knowing yourself. You go there because, well, maybe you're ready for a vacation. And it's a great place to go, or so you've heard. And it's wonderful also to go and to have sacred pilgrimage. And there is definitely benefit to sacred pilgrimage, to going to sites and places, temples, churches, caves, that are renowned for their energy. They inspire us, but they don't do the work for us. And this is where we get a little bit lazy in our languaging. As we say, I went to the cave of the mother and I was awakened. you went to the cave of the mother and you prayed to be awakened, and then you made the choice within yourself to do the work necessary for that outcome. And that's a beautiful thing. But the reality is this: until you can make that choice anywhere and in regard to anything, nope, not going to last. It's not going to last. In the olden days, ancient times, it used to be that monks would oftentimes go live in the woods. They go live in a cave, segregate themselves from society. They still do. But there came a point in time, and I believe it's Sri Shankaracharya who talked about it, and most certainly Swami Shivananda talked about it too. Many of the great teachers did. Where he said, the answer doesn't lie in a cave where you're sitting alone, not encountering the world. That's not necessarily the cultivation of qualities of compassion and nonviolence. That's just learning how to sit in a cave and not have to deal with the world. Learning how to sit in a cave has its benefit, for sure. It's a tool. But it's not the be-all, end-all, because it doesn't take care of all the nooks and crannies of the triggers that we carry around with us. It doesn't take care of how we walk through the world. Instead, it only teaches us how to have karaoke syndrome. I think I talked about this last week, maybe. I don't know. Maybe I didn't. Does anybody know what karaoke syndrome is? No. You ever go to karaoke? Who in here has gone to karaoke? Okay, a couple of, good. Thought I was on my own there for a moment. Like, whoa, am I that old? No. Yeah, so what happens in karaoke typically is that someone will get up and sing a song, and oh man, they'll knock it out of the ballpark, right? Like, they sing it better than the singer sang it, right? And then a little while later, they'll go back up to sing another song, and they're off key, they don't know the words, they don't know the melody, and it's not pretty. It's karaoke syndrome. Why are they great at the first song and not great at the second song? Because they only invested their energy into the first song. They never allowed themselves to have exposure of a similar sort to the second song. If we go sit in the cave, we will learn how to sit in the cave, and we will do it brilliantly. And there's a benefit to that. It's a tool. But it will not help us to walk through the world. In order to walk through the world, we must walk through the world. We must learn what it is to be peace embodied, compassion embodied, wisdom embodied, honesty embodied, nonviolence embodied. And not just in the moments that are easy, not just in the moments that don't require much from us, not just in the moments where we may as well be sitting in a cave, but in the moments that are tempting, that are pushing. How many of you have brothers or sisters? Remember when you were little? I'm not touching you. Yeah. You're sitting in the backseat of the car. My brother used to do it all the time. And he'd be like, right in my shoulder. And I'd be like, knock it off. Be like, what are you doing? I'm not doing anything. And my mother would be in the front. And of course, I'd be the one to get in trouble, right? Because he wasn't doing anything. Yeah. We have to be needled a little bit in order to understand how to put these spiritual qualities into action, and in order to see the efficacy of them. It doesn't mean that we put ourselves in harm's way. We don't. We don't need to. We live in a very violent world. We don't need to put ourselves into harm's way. Harm is there. But what we need to do is cultivate faith and trust and understanding that the qualities that we cultivate within our spiritual journey have value to us in those moments where we're facing harm, either from outside or in, and that they can counteract it. But we can't run away. We can't run from it. We can't say, I'm just going to go to Machu Picchu because it's easier. First of all, it's not easier. Any of you ever go to Machu Picchu? It's at the top of a mountain. You have to climb to go there. At least hike. And it's not easy. Right? You ever go to India? It's not easy to go there. It's a 16-hour plane ride, and then there's airports, and then there's people, and it's a different world. It's not easy. But can you be peace in the midst of all that chaos? Can you be peace as you're hiking the mountain? Can you be compassion? Can you be patient? Can you allow the veil of ignorance to be thinner and thinner and thinner? Or as you're going to the top of the mountain where the air is becoming thinner and thinner and thinner, will you react instead? And start having doubt, I can't do this, there's no way. I'm not strong enough, I'm not enough. And that's our day, typically, is that we consistently doubt ourselves. In doubt, the veil of ignorance is very thick. In harmful judgment, the veil of ignorance is very thick. In hate, the veil of ignorance is the thickest. If we wish to really see through eyes that are wise, and to know through a heart whose wisdom is empowered, then we need to behave in such a way that the veil of ignorance becomes thinner and thinner and thinner, and eventually dissolves. And there's a responsibility there to really look inside of ourselves and to recognize what our triggers are, recognize what our tendencies are, to acknowledge them openly and honestly with ourselves, and then to do the work necessary to heal them to whatever degree they can be in this life. That's karmic reconciliation right there. Do the work. The rewards will come. Don't do the work for the rewards, because the rewards are always accompanied by something else, which are the not rewards, right? Just do the work for the sake of being more open, being less congested. So in class, I talked a little bit in the beginning about my dog, one of my two dogs, Marika. And she's just such a great example of this, you know. She tends to get constipated, as older dogs often do. And she knows what it takes to get rid of her constipation. She knows what to do, for the most part. She finds crunchy leaves to step on, or she gets really excited when there's frost out there, because she'll go and she'll step on the crunchy grass. And that crunchy grass, or the crunchy leaves, will instigate her to eliminate. It will instigate her to release what she's constipated with, you know, which in her case is poop. In our case, it's probably poop, but it's also life. And as I asked in class, and I'll ask again, do you know what instigates the alleviation of your own constipation? Do you know what your crunchy leaves are? Do you know what you need to do? And if you do, are you doing it? Are you using that tool that you have become aware of in this life, in this moment, this day, in order to make this moment, this day, this life a better place for you, a place where you can be more present, more spacious, more circulating. And constipation is really, I mean, it's a physical downer, right? Anybody ever been constipated? Of course. Does it feel good? No. As a matter of fact, it's a pretty horrible feeling. You feel sluggish and dull, and slow, thick, tired, frustrated. all those qualities again, creeping in, right? So what do? We run down and we get Viralax. Is that what it's called, or something like that? I don't know. One of those laxative things. And we say, this will take care of it. And for a moment it does. But guess what? You didn't make the lifestyle changes necessary. So in 2 days' time, the constipation is back. What are the lifestyle changes necessary to alleviate constipation? Is to eat properly, to drink enough fluids, to exercise properly, to sleep properly, to handle your stress properly, to have times of quiet and relaxation, and to also have times of stimulation and creativity. And if we don't have all those things in some kind of a decent place, the constipation's not going to go anywhere, no matter how many Miralax you take. All that's doing is causing a violent outburst that is not being supported by choices. And that's probably the greatest difference between us and Marika, my puppy, my older dog, is that, you know, her constipation, she's a nervous Nelly. She's got a lot of anxiety, but her constipation is mostly because she's an older dog, you know, and she's vulnerable to what I feed her. She's vulnerable, you know, to the treats I give her. She gets plenty of sleep. She could probably get a little bit more exercise. But those are also not her choices. The sleep is her choice, but the exercise is also my responsibility, right? Who's responsible for your choices? Who makes sure that you get enough sleep, that you eat well, that you drink enough fluids? You are. You are. And that's the difference between us and Marika, is that many of the decisions that impact her constipation come from outside of her. Ours come from inside of us. So if we want to experience lightness in the physical body, and then its correlate, which is constipation in the mind. And what is constipation in the mind? Is gripping on to thoughts that are disastrous for us, that are harmful, that are dull, that are sluggish, that are not creative, not expansive, not flowing, not circulating. If we want to alleviate that, then we have to do the work inside of ourselves. Make the right choices, the best possible choices that we can. Some part of that is society-oriented, I understand that. But a large part of it is you and me. We can change our lives. We can change our temperament. We can change our tendencies. We can change our triggers. We can lessen the suffering that we ourselves experience, and in doing so, lessen the suffering of others. How does that work? Because when we suffer less, we are less violent people, and less violent people hurt others less. So when we say, I believe in world peace, I support world peace, what we're saying is, I am going to be a better person, so I'm not contributing to world violence. Because we can't control what other people do. We can't make them eat right, sleep right, breathe right, be right. That's their choice. Unless they're a dog. Then maybe they have a human guiding them. But we have free will. Completely, for the most part. Completely spiritually. But in walking through the world, we have free will. Are we exercising it? Our free will is our crunchy leaves. Crunchy leaves equates to our free will. And when we exercise our free will in a way that brings us greater balance in the body, greater balance in the mind, then we won't be so constipated, mentally or physically. And we won't need drastic measures to correct when things are out of balance. We won't need the drastic measures. We'll recognize that there are other things that we can do that bring us into a greater balance with ourselves. So instead of the Miralax or whatever that stuff is, maybe we work with abdominal massage and Abhyanga, and we understand that we need to incorporate maybe some prune juice in our meal, you know. We make different choices. That may sound kind of silly, and it's like, wow, this is a really interesting spiritual conversation, isn't it? But let's look at it in another way. There's a person who irritates you, who makes you angry. And all they have to do is say hi, and you're just like, oh, hair on the back of the neck standing up. In a place where you are circulating more in line or aligned with consciousness, you see that there's alternatives to that reaction. You don't need to let the hair on the back of your neck stand up. You can actually see this person in a different light, a light of suffering. They're suffering. A light of struggle. They're struggling. A light of compassion. A light of healthy boundaries. A light of, I have responsibilities for my own self, and I will practice those responsibilities. You have responsibilities for your own self, and I will allow you. I will get out of your way. I will not impose or impede on your responsibilities. Healthy boundaries. Less constipation physically and mentally means that we can recognize that, and our relationships change because of it. Doesn't mean that other people change. It means that we change. Too often times, when we feel we have stepped onto this spiritual path, we feel everybody around us should change. They should be better people because I'm more peaceful. And that's silly. That's just silly. They're not going to change until they change. And in regard to their path, what they're doing in their life, the only one in your life who is going to change is you. But as long as the veil of ignorance is thick, we're not able to see that. Instead, we look out and we say, I blame you and you and you and you. Because if you would only be nicer, if you would only get out of my way. But as we look inside, as we turn inside, we recognize, actually, I'm the one who's in the way here. Maybe they could grow a little bit more if I wasn't holding on to this so much. Maybe I could grow a little bit more if I wasn't holding on to this so much. Maybe there needs to be a boundary. And maybe that boundary needs to be kept. And maybe I just need to focus on my health and my wellness and being of service in general to society. And then just leave people alone. Just leave them alone because they're already suffering. No matter how much you don't like them, no matter how much you do, there's not a person in this world that isn't suffering. And how do we know that? Because people who don't suffer don't hurt people. People who don't suffer are generally super healthy people, according to like the Ayurveda definition of health, which is that they have balanced doshas, so their elemental constitution is balanced. They have balanced fire inside of themselves, appropriate for digestive processes. They have a mind that is content, a heart that is devotional. Their tissues and systems all work appropriately, and their mind works appropriately. And if all of that isn't in place, then there's suffering happening. Do you know anybody where all of that is in place all of the time? No. So everybody is suffering on some level to some degree. And we can look out at the world, we can look out and see and recognize that and have compassion for it. Because for as much struggle as you have had trying to find yourself, so have they. For as much trouble as you are still having, so are they. You don't need to be their biggest fan. You don't even need to like them. Just leave them alone. Just leave them alone. Address your own veil. Let them fix theirs. Because you can't fix theirs. It's not possible. That's a lot. But it really does all come down to this idea that I brought up in class earlier, that is spoken about in the Tattva Bodha. At the very beginning of the book, I'll just read a passage to you. And so this is Swami Dayananda Saraswati from the Arshavijaya Gurukulam up in Sailorsburg. He's no longer in the physical body. He Mahasamadhi or died a few years back. But just such an amazing being with such a wealth of wisdom that he has shared with the world. And so this is his commentary on the scripture called the Tattva Bodha. And he says, the means of knowledge, such as perception and inference, are not meant for knowing the Atman, since through them we can only know objects. So our sense perception allows us to know that's a chair, this is a carpet, these are clothes. They don't allow us, the senses don't allow us to know who we really are, because who we really are is beyond the senses. We require another means of knowledge. This is Shabda, the words of the teaching of the Shruti or scriptures. If the teaching is there, the Atman is there, then knowledge should take place. If knowledge does not take place, one can assume that either the teaching is not pramana, is not a full teaching, or Atman is not free of all its problems. The person says, my Atman is different, Swamiji. I do not see it as free, whole, and so on, which are simply words. Atman may be okay, but the Shruti Pramana is not adequate or appropriate. I need to do something else in order to know the Atman. One other person told me, I have listened to Shruti Vedanta, yet I have not realized the Atman, so I am doing something else instead. It's like saying, I have used my eyes and still I haven't seen the color, so I'm going to use my nose instead. If one does not see the color, one should go to an ophthalmologist and find out whether one has color blindness. Just because one does not see a pramana does not cease to be one, because it works for someone else. And accordingly to the pramana, there is only one Atman, which is the whole, the limitless. Therefore, one's Atman is not different from that of anyone else's. And he goes on. So basically what he's saying there is this veil of illusion, this veil of ignorance that we carry around with us is like trying to see color by smelling through your nose. I know there's some theories out today that say you can feel color and things like that, but the reality is you cannot see color through your nose. You cannot see color through your skin. You see through your eyes. So we have to use the aspects of ourselves appropriately in order to acquire the knowledge necessary to go from feeling that we are separate and limited and doomed to understanding that we are actually whole. We are limitless. We are not this body, not this mind, not these 5 pranas, the energies. We are something more. We are bliss absolute. Bliss absolute. Does that mean that we should just throw this body away? No. We must care for the body because it's our vehicle. It takes us from morning to afternoon to night, day to day to day, from home to work, from work to an outing with our friends. So body does a lot of work. If it's a female body, maybe it brings forth babies. It brings forth pleasure. It brings also pain. So we have to take care of the body. But the body is not who you are. Because who you are doesn't just die away. Who you are is spiritual. What carries you around is physical. Additionally, there's this mind, and the beautiful mantra, the Shivoham, says, I am not this body, I am not this mind. Well, what do you mean I'm not this mind? These are my thoughts. I'm thinking I want to be awakened. That's not me. No, it's not, because you already are awakened. You, the real you, already is awakened. Just take a little nap. The other aspect of consciousness that we can call a mind is not representative of the entirety of you. It's only your reaction to the world you're in, the physical world. The mind takes in the information from the senses, categorizes it, and uses that to make judgments. And oftentimes doesn't see beyond the judgments. You ever ask someone a question and you're like, can you just give me the answer? Just tell me what the right thing is to do because of this and this and this and this. And they're like, just be quiet and close your eyes. You already have the answer, but your mind is stopping you from recognizing it because it's using sense perceptions, what you've seen, heard, tasted, smelled, touched, and felt in the past, in order to create a box for you to fit in and for your experience to fit in. And as long as we limit ourselves to that, we will never find the solution. But every once in a while, you make that choice in great clarity, and what do you feel? Immense relief. Like, of course that was the right thing to do. How come I didn't do it sooner? Because you were caught up in the mind. You were caught up in the mechanism that categorizes this life and then uses those categories to fit you into a square. But you are not a square. You are a circle. And your circle is bigger than the square. It doesn't fit in there. Does that all make sense? Yeah? Time check. Okay. So let's take a pause there and say, would anybody like to ask any questions or share any reflections? Both are welcome. I've been talking enough. Does it make sense? Yes.
In the moment when you're angry just about life in general, in that moment, how do you not lash out on people? How do you get yourself to not lash out on people?
That's a great question.
Because then after the fact, you're like, oh, I was just angry, it was me. But in that moment, how do you stop it from happening?
Yeah, it's a great question. So how do you not lash out? What do you do to stop yourself from lashing out? If you were running, there's a cinder block wall there, what would you do to not hit the wall? What would you do? Stop. Stop. If you were running, or if you were in your car driving, and there was a cliff right there, what would you do to not go over the cliff?
Just stop.
Stop. Yeah. So here comes the anger. What do you do to not lash out? Stop. Now, it's not a matter of stuffing the anger. It's actually a bit more complicated than that, because the first thing we need to know is what it feels like for anger to arrive. We need to know what that feels like. Thich Nhat Hanh has a beautiful meditation on anger where, he's like, you feel it arriving in your toes and your fingers. Feel it arriving in the temperature of your body, in the way the hairs of your body are standing on end. Be familiar with, aware of, very knowledgeable of what anger feels like, so that you recognize it when it's knocking on the door. Maybe you become so skillful at recognizing it that you can stop long before you get to that brick wall. You can say, I feel this is going a certain way, and in this moment I'm not willing to go that direction, so I'm going to take my leave. But maybe you missed those cues, those early cues. And now you're in a place where the hair is standing on end and the temperature's getting warm. Then you accept responsibility. And you can say something like, in this moment, I'm feeling really angry, and I'm going to take some time to sit with that and to think about whether or not I feel I have good cause for this anger. So I'm not going to talk about this anymore right now. But some moments necessitate response. In which case, do whatever work you can to allow your response to come from a place of genuine care, compassion, even if it's angry. Don't let the anger come from a place of, I hate you and I want to hurt you. If the anger is there, there's a lot of things in life to be angry about. If the anger is there, let it be there, but don't allow it to become a murderer. Let it be a vehicle that inspires change in yourself, because you can't change anybody else. Does that make sense? Yeah. Any other questions or reflections right now? Last week I joked around, right? I said, first class, everybody was back. I was going to make it a nice gentle yin, a nice gentle spiritual conversation. It's like, nope. Dive right into the hard stuff, right into it. So, but we got to talk about these things, right? It's like, this is the practicality of it all. This is the practical side of spirituality. It's not all butterflies and unicorns. As a matter of fact, it's not butterflies and unicorns. It's not feel good. It's actually feel pretty crappy for a while. It's not easy. It's easy to pretend. It's certainly easy to pretend and to be like, well, I'm a gentle person. I speak with a low voice. I walk lightly and I don't hurt anybody. No. Maybe at some point that becomes incorporated, the lower voice and the gentler footsteps. But initially, you're still stomping your feet and you're still talking in terms, You're still confused. The veil is like a second skin for us. It's messy. It's like peeling off a layer of who you think you are. That's not easy. It's not comfortable. And this is why Sangha is very important. Sangha is like-minded community. Because as we're doing that very, very, difficult work of peeling back the layers, discovering, rediscovering what's true and what's fantasy and what's fallacy, it's super supportive to have like-minded individuals around us, because we can recognize they're struggling and they're advancing easily, and it doesn't threaten us. We look and we are inspired. Surround yourself by people who inspire you, not by people who you have an issue with. Because if you surround yourself with people who you have an issue with, you won't be inspired by them because you'll feel like that's giving away your power. But being inspired by people is not giving away your power. It's recognition that we can all change if we would only allow ourselves to. But we're human, you know, we have these tendencies. So Sangha, very important, like-minded individuals, also not individuals who are likely to look at you and to say, you know, oh, you're trying to stop drinking? Let's go have a beer. You're trying to stop smoking? Here, have a cigarette. You're trying to stop cursing? Here, say this word. You're trying to deal with your anger? Oh, I'm just going to piss you off a little more. Sangha doesn't do that. No, it doesn't play games. There's no game playing in Sangha. There's respect for the work that's being done. There's dignity. And there's inspiration. And finally, Sangha, which is so many things. It's such a limited conversation. And you know, I had to giggle the other day. A good friend, Shambhu, he was at the Upanishad studies and he wrote me a beautiful letter. And he said, yeah, you know, even talking about one Upanishad could take a lifetime. You know, talking about Sangha can take a lifetime because it's so many things. But the third very important thing that it is a group of individuals who are seeking self and seeking service and seeking peace and are willing to do the work necessary in order to discover and rediscover those things. Versus out in the world, when most people will look at you and say, you're wasting your time. You're not enough. Is that really the story and the message that you want to receive all the time? Sangha is not fake. Sangha is not rose-colored glasses. Sangha is very honest. As Sangha will tell you where your work is. You know, just like we're sitting here today and I'm talking to you. But they'll also tell you where your splendor is. They'll tell you where you need work. They'll talk with you and they'll nurture and care genuinely. And they'll celebrate you also. When was the last time you felt celebrated in the world? It's not an easy thing to feel out there. Because everybody's suffering. And people who are deeply suffering don't tend to have a lot of space for celebration. Does that make sense? So you can't look for it out there. You can't. You won't get it. You won't. And if you think you will, then that will just contribute to more suffering. So we need to turn in, at least a little bit. Commit to our own work. Find our crunchy leaves. Alleviate our own constipation. Stop worrying about other people alleviating theirs. As my guru would say, MYOB, mind your own business. Literally, right? Mind to your own business, yeah. Find a community of like-minded people. You're here with one right now. Don't be afraid of that. Nobody here is going to ask anything of you. Come to class, come to Satsang. Let it be a sanctuary. That's what it's here for. Nobody's going to ask anything of you. So funny. Michelle is working in the kitchen right now. I do believe it was Michelle. She was talking to somebody one day who had just kind of stopped by and were curious, and they asked her a question, and I'm paraphrasing greatly, but it went something like, "Are you allowed to leave here?" She said, "Excuse me?" And they were like, "Well, yeah, like, are you allowed to like do stuff?" And she was like, "I can do whatever I want to do. This is not that, you know. This is not that. No one's going to ask anything of you here." except to do your work. That's all. And not to do it perfectly. So let's also just address that, because there's this idea in the spiritual world that, well, okay, I'm on the spiritual path, now I must be perfect. No, it's not possible. You are a human. In all your humanness, it is not possible to be perfect. It is only possible to be you, and to know what that is, to some degree. So it's really the intention of the work that counts. It's the intention. And it's also the acknowledgement that, you know what, when I don't choose myself, when I choose to eat the whole pizza or the chocolate cake, and I know it's going to bother my stomach, I'm making that choice consciously. I'm accepting that the consequences are going to be there. Doesn't make me a bad person. It just means that the work I just did trying to thin the veil of ignorance is going to get a little thicker again. Do I really want the pizza? I don't know. You go through this inquiry, you know? You go through this inquiry and you accept responsibility for yourself. It's a beautiful path. It's a very freeing path. It's the only path of freedom that exists, is to know thyself, who you think you are and who you really are. Any other questions or reflections right now? Kathy?
Touching on the anger issue, once you feel it and recognize it and you stop, how do you release it so that your body doesn't hold on to it?
Good question. You're so full of good questions. Thank you. Yeah, how do you let go of it?
Go scream
Get a
at the
hobby.
pillow.
No.
Go scream
Go
at the
running,
pillow.
just not into any walls. Drive your car, just not too fast or over any cliffs. How do you get rid of it? Well, there's a couple of things that you can do. First, you can have an altar in your home. And you can have a little dish on that altar. And you can just keep putting it into that dish. You can just keep symbolically putting it into the dish. And so I will typically sit in front of Mother Durga. And if there's something that I can't deal with, or that I'm not willing to deal with, I would just say, beloved Mother, I won't right now. I can't right now. I don't believe it right now. Please take this from me, because you know what to do with this. And then bring it back to me in a way that allows me to grow. Bring it back to me in a way that I'm able to, that I see my own strength, my own faith, and my own conviction, my own courage. Because in this moment, I can't, and I won't. You must understand the difference between can't and won't, right? Won't is your resistance and refusal, and that's 99.9% of the issue. Can't is very little. Like, you can't fly, okay? This is true. You can't stop being angry. This is not true. You won't stop being angry because you haven't found an alternative that you find acceptable yet. Because on some level we think that if we let go of our anger, it shows weakness. Because that's what we've been enculturated to believe. That's what we were raised to believe. But it's not true. To hold the anger is to what? Is to become constipated. To hold the anger without any due process is to be congested, is to steal spaciousness from yourself. So put it on your altar and ask her, him, it to support you in resolving it. Also, there's other things that you could do that are super therapeutic. You can draw and paint. You can spin, as long as you don't have a heart issue or a brain issue. You can spin. Like the twirlers, yeah, like Rumi, right?
You mean like standing and
Yeah,
spinning?
totally. You can do the 5 Tibetan exercises. You can practice yoga. You can stomp your feet. You can go out into the backyard and scream. Just maybe let everybody know that you're not, hurt. There's lots of things you can do to get the circulation. So you don't really want to get the anger out of you. And anger is an energy, and it's just going to continue flowing in the stream of consciousness. What we're really looking to do is to not avoid it or get rid of it. We're looking to evolve it. We're looking to evolve it. I don't want this energy to be stagnant. I want it to move and to bring spaciousness. And don't spiritual bypass, right? So sometimes we're angry for really good darn reasons. And that anger is going to prompt us to take some action. Let it be that for you. Let it be a springboard in some moments for good, positive action, the development of healthy boundaries, the turning into self-reflection, the acceptance of responsibility, the necessity of defining for yourself what you will and will not tolerate in this life from others. And just because you say, I will not tolerate this from you, doesn't mean they're not going to do it. It means you're not going to be present to it. You will remove yourself. Lots of ways. Lots of ways. The very first step is to be willing to let it go. And by let it go, I mean change it. I mean, don't do this. Don't grip onto it. I don't mean push it away. First step is willingness. And the second step is trying everything under God's blue sky. Plant seeds. Plant seeds, literally. Plant seeds. Plant flowers along the edge of your property. You'll fall in love in a moment. If anger is the issue, replace it with the opposite. Something that brings you joy. But don't push it away. Invite it to be a participant. When you plant the seeds, say, see anger? You can plant seeds with love. You can. Because I can. Sometimes we have to talk to ourselves that way. Yeah. Good questions. Anyone else? Any other thoughts or reflections? Okay. We are at our time. Exactly. I've done well for 2 weeks in a row. Stopped right on time instead of 15 minutes late. So for everyone who's staying for lunch, they will be serving down in the kitchen, and then you can go to the student center and eat there. It's a little chilly outside, but we do have tables out there as well. You can also ask for a to-go container if that's your preference. I hope you enjoy your lunch. I'm super grateful that you were all here today for Yin and for Wisdom Circle, so thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Let's share one Om. Sit up nice and tall. Take a breath in. Om.